An airport employee casually dismissed a traveler, unaware the woman he ignored held the weight of a nation's gaze. The fluorescent light of the airport terminal cast a harsh, unforgiving glow on everything it touched. The scuff marks on the linoleum floor, the weary lines etched into travelers' faces, the faded logos on the employees' uniforms. It was late, later than she usually liked to travel, the kind of hour where patience wore thin and transactional courtesies frayed at the edges. Jasmine stood in a short queue, her carry-on bag resting lightly against her ankle, a folder of documents held loosely in her left hand. Her posture was relaxed but alert, a quiet stillness that came from years of navigating spaces that weren't always built for her. The line moved sluggishly towards the service desk, manned by a man who seemed to view each approaching passenger as a personal affront. He was young, maybe early 20s, his name tag slightly askew, his eyes flickering with a restless boredom that bordered on disdain. When it was her turn, she stepped forward, offering a small, polite smile. "Excuse me," she began, her voice low and clear. "I just needed to confirm a detail about my connecting flight." The employee didn't meet her eyes immediately. He was tapping something on his keyboard, his expression one of weary exasperation, as if the very existence of another human needing assistance was an unbearable burden. "Yeah, hold on," he mumbled, not looking up, the words clipped and dismissive. It wasn't the words themselves that were remarkable. It was the tone, a flat, generic impatience that seemed designed to shrink the person on the other side of the counter. It was the sound of being filed away, categorized as just another inconvenience in a long, irritating night. Jasmine's smile didn't falter, but something in her eyes sharpened almost imperceptibly. It was a flicker, a tiny internal adjustment, like a camera lens focusing on a distant, difficult object. She remained silent, her gaze steady on the top of his head as he continued to tap, his attention clearly anywhere but on her. A woman in line behind her shifted impatiently, checking her watch. An older gentleman further back sighed audibly. The mundane sounds of the airport, the distant boarding announcements, the rumble of luggage wheels, the low murmur of conversations, seemed to recede, leaving a small pocket of quiet tension around the service desk. The employee finally looked up, his eyes scanning her face for a brief second before dropping back to his screen, then her folder. He didn't ask her name or flight number. "What's the issue?" he asked, the tone slightly more engaged but still lacking any real interest or respect. It was the way people spoke when they assumed you were incompetent or trying to pull a fast one. Jasmine maintained her quiet composure. She placed her folder on the counter, sliding it forward slightly. "I received an email update about a gate change," she explained, her voice calm and measured. "It contradicted the information I received earlier. I just wanted to confirm the correct gate and departure time." She spoke clearly, concisely, providing the necessary information without fuss. The employee picked up her folder, his movements jerky and abrupt. He riffled through the papers inside, his brow furrowed, not in concentration but in what looked like annoyance. He didn't ask for her ID or boarding pass initially, just scanned the documents she had, documents that clearly identified her, not just by name, but by her official capacity. He paused for a moment, his eyes lingering on something in the folder, a slight hesitation in his rapid movements. For a fleeting second, a flicker of recognition seemed to cross his face, quickly replaced by the same weary indifference. It was like watching someone almost step on something important in the dark, feeling a bump, but dismissing it as just another rock. He put the folder down, pushing it back towards her without comment. He turned back to his screen, tapping a few more keys. The silence stretched heavy and awkward. He didn't offer an apology for the wait, didn't explain what he was doing, just left her standing there waiting. This wasn't just inefficiency. It felt like an intentional withholding, a minor exercise of perceived power. Jasmine didn't press, didn't demand, didn't raise her voice. She simply waited, her gaze steady, her expression unreadable but undeniably present. Her stillness in the face of his dismissiveness was the most striking thing. While others in her position might have shown frustration, impatience, or even indignation, she offered only a quiet, unwavering presence. The air thickened with unspoken dynamics. The employee seemed oblivious, lost in the glow of his screen, but the subtle shift in the energy around the desk was palpable. The woman behind her in line was now watching Jasmine, her earlier impatience replaced by a curious observation. She wasn't looking at the employee. She was looking at the woman enduring his attitude, sensing something significant in the quiet space she occupied. It was the beginning of the moment, the tiny spark igniting the slow burn. The tapping of the employee's keys was loud in the quiet space, a staccato rhythm of bureaucratic indifference. He finally swiveled back towards her, his hand extended expectantly. "ID and boarding pass," he said, his voice flat, as if repeating a requirement for the 10th time that minute to a particularly slow person. His eyes still avoided hers directly, focusing instead on the counter surface between them. Jasmine reached into her coat pocket, retrieving her documents. She handed them to him calmly, her movements precise and deliberate. As he took them, his fingers brushed hers briefly, a fleeting physical contact devoid of any warmth. He glanced at her ID, then at her boarding pass, his expression unchanging. But this time, his gaze lingered slightly longer on the photograph and the name on the identification card. A micro-expression, quick as a camera flash, crossed his face. It was a subtle tightening around the eyes, a slight parting of the lips that wasn't a smile, more like a swallowed breath. It was the look of someone who had been speaking on autopilot and suddenly heard their own words echoing back with unexpected resonance. The name on the ID was unmistakable. The face was unmistakable to anyone who paid even a sliver of attention to national news. For a fraction of a second, the weary facade cracked, revealing a sliver of something else. Surprise, perhaps, or dawning comprehension. He looked from the ID to her face again. This time, his gaze held for a beat longer. The casual dismissiveness of moments before seemed to waver, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. The power dynamic in the small space shifted subtly. He had been the gatekeeper, the arbiter of attention and assistance. Now, he was just a young man holding an identification card that spoke volumes he hadn't anticipated. He placed the documents back on the counter carefully, his earlier abruptness gone. He turned back to his screen, his tapping now less confident, more hesitant. He pulled up her reservation, his movement slower, more deliberate. The woman behind Jasmine leaned forward slightly, trying to see the name on the boarding pass. The older gentleman cleared his throat, a low sound that seemed to punctuate the silence. The air hummed with a new kind of energy, a tension that wasn't confrontational, but anticipatory. They could sense the employee's sudden change in demeanor, the way his shoulders had stiffened slightly, the sudden stillness in his previous fidgeting. He was no longer just processing a request. He was processing a realization. Jasmine remained still, her hands resting gently on the counter beside her folder. She offered no comment. No, "Do you know who I am?" She didn't need to. Her presence, combined with the undeniable evidence of her identity, was doing all the talking. She simply observed him, her expression neutral, allowing him the space to grapple with his sudden understanding. The silence was louder than any shouted argument. It was the sound of someone's world tilting slightly on its axis, the quiet dismantling of a preconceived notion. The employee finished typing, his fingers hovering over the keys for a moment before he finally spoke. His voice, when it came, was different. It was softer, less clipped, tinged with a newfound carefulness. "Okay," he said, still not quite meeting her eyes fully. "Yeah, the gate was changed. It's C-17. Departure is still on time, 11:45 p.m. He provided the information she had initially requested, but the delivery was completely altered. He even offered a small, awkward gesture towards the screen, as if inviting her to verify. He didn't apologize for the delay or the earlier tone. He didn't need to. The change in his demeanor was a silent apology in itself, a clumsy acknowledgement of his error. Jasmine nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said, her voice still calm. She reached for her documents, gathering them smoothly. As she picked up her ID, she glanced at the employee again, a steady level look that held no malice, but carried an undeniable weight. It wasn't a look of triumph, but of quiet knowing. It was the look that said, "Now you see me." The woman behind her in line exchanged a quick, knowing glance with the older gentleman. They had witnessed the transformation, the instant shift from dismissiveness to deference. It was a small moment, easily missed if you weren't paying attention, but for those who saw it, it spoke volumes about assumptions, power, and recognition. Jasmine didn't linger. She gathered her things and stepped away from the counter, creating space for the next person. She didn't turn back. The incident, for her, seemed to be already receding, a minor ripple in her journey. But for the employee, and for the few who had witnessed it, the ripple was just beginning to spread. As Jasmine walked away from the service desk, a subtle shift occurred in the energy of the people nearby. It wasn't just the employee, still visibly processing the interaction he'd just had. His previous swagger replaced by a hesitant uncertainty. The woman behind her in line, who had witnessed the entire exchange, now looked at Jasmine with a new kind of attention. Her earlier impatience was gone, replaced by a sort of quiet admiration, or perhaps just simple curiosity about the woman whose calm presence had so effectively neutralized the employee's initial rudeness. The older gentleman observed the scene with a slight tilt of his head, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. He seemed to understand the subtle power play that had just unfolded, recognizing the strength in Jasmine's absolute lack of reaction to the initial insult. Jasmine, however, seemed almost oblivious to the stir her quiet composure had created. She adjusted her grip on her carry-on bag and folder, her movements smooth and unhurried. She wasn't rushing away in embarrassment or frustration. She was simply continuing her journey. Her focus was inward, a quiet moment of processing the brief friction she had just experienced. She didn't glance back at the employee. There was no need for a parting look, no need to reinforce the moment. Her departure was as understated as her reaction to his initial dismissiveness. As she moved towards her newly confirmed gate, her aide, a young woman named Maria, who had been standing a little distance away, finishing a brief phone call, approached her. Maria had seen the end of the interaction at the desk, catching the employee's sudden change in posture and the reactions of the people in line. She fell into step beside Jasmine, her expression one of quiet inquiry. "Everything okay?" Maria asked, her voice low, not wanting to draw attention. It wasn't a question about the flight information. It was a question about the interaction itself. She had seen enough over the years to recognize the subtle signs of someone navigating unnecessary friction. Jasmine took a slow, steadying breath that was barely audible. It wasn't a sigh of relief, but a quiet release of the contained tension. "Yes, Maria," she replied, her voice calm. "Gate C-17. Looks like the information was correct." She didn't elaborate on the interaction with the employee. There was no need to replay the slight. Her dismissal of the incident was as complete as the employee's initial dismissal of her. Maria, however, sensed the unspoken. She glanced back towards the service desk. The employee was now helping the next person in line, but his movements were still hesitant, his gaze occasionally flicking towards where Jasmine had been standing. He looked like someone who had just woken up abruptly. Maria turned her attention back to Jasmine. She noticed the perfect stillness of Jasmine's hands as she held the folder, the calm set of her shoulders. There was a profound dignity in her stillness, a quiet power that didn't need volume or confrontation to assert itself. It was a lesson Maria had learned many times watching Jasmine navigate various challenging situations. The most impactful responses were often the ones that were withheld. They continued walking down the concourse. Other travelers, busy with their own journeys, hurried past them. Most didn't notice anything out of the ordinary, but for the handful who had witnessed the scene at the service desk, the image of Jasmine's quiet composure in the face of casual disrespect was beginning to solidify. They carried that image with them, a small, unspoken observation that held more weight than a loud argument ever could have. The moment wasn't just about an airport employee missing a beat. It was about how one person chose to embody strength, not through reaction, but through unwavering self-possession. It was about the power of being seen, even when someone initially refuses to look. The incident contained within the small sphere of the service desk moments ago was now beginning its slow, inevitable spread through the collective consciousness of those who had witnessed it. A seed of awareness had been planted, watered by Jasmine's quiet dignity. The employee stood straighter behind the counter now, his movements less jerky, more formal. He was still helping passengers, but his attention felt divided, his eyes occasionally scanning the receding figures down the concourse. He kept glancing at the spot where Jasmine had stood, a subtle shift in his posture indicating that his internal equilibrium had been disrupted. He processed the next passenger's request with a practiced politeness that felt forced, a stark contrast to his earlier weary impatience. He had been operating on a kind of autopilot, filtering every interaction through the lens of a late-night demanding job. And then suddenly the face, the name, the official capacity. It was like static clearing on a radio, revealing a signal he hadn't expected. He thought back to his initial tone, the casual dismissal. He could almost hear it again, amplified by the sudden unwelcome context. He felt a prickle of heat rise in his neck. He wasn't just dealing with a passenger. He had been curt, dismissive, perhaps even rude, to the passenger. His mind raced, replaying the micro-moments, her quiet greeting, his mumbled response, the way she calmly handed him the folder, his cursory glance, his hesitation upon seeing the ID, the sudden cold clarity of recognition, and her reaction, or lack thereof. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't pulled rank. She hadn't even given him a pointed look as she left. Her composure was unnerving. It felt like a challenge, not because it was aggressive, but because it was so utterly self-possessed. It stripped away his ability to frame the interaction as just him dealing with a difficult customer. It was him being casually disrespectful to someone who demanded respect not through words, but through her very bearing. He found himself checking the time, his shift ending soon, and the prospect of recounting this moment, if anyone asked, filled him with a vague dread. He imagined someone, perhaps a supervisor or colleague, seeing the news later and asking, "Didn't she come through your line tonight?" The thought made his stomach clench. He finished with the current passenger, offering a polite, "Have a good flight," that sounded hollow to his own ears. The next person approached and he forced a smile, trying to reset, but the image of her calm, unwavering gaze remained fixed in his mind. Meanwhile, further down the concourse, the woman who had been in line behind Jasmine pulled out her phone. She wasn't planning to do anything grand, just texting her friend. But the image of the moment was vivid. Just saw something crazy at the service desk. Employee was being a total jerk to this lady, then totally froze when he saw her ID. Like instantly changed his tune. She was so calm, though. She debated adding the person's name, then decided against it. It felt more powerful as an observation of the employee's reaction than about the famous person. He turned white LOL. She hit send. A small, private ripple. The older gentleman, on the other hand, didn't have a phone. He simply walked towards his gate, the small incident tucked away in his memory. He'd seen similar things before. Quiet moments where assumptions were challenged by reality. He admired the woman's restraint. He knew the urge to react, to point out the injustice or the ignorance, but he also knew the power of allowing someone to come to their own realization. Her silence had been her strength. Back at the desk, the employee continued his shift, but his rhythm was off. Every interaction felt fraught with the possibility of another mistake, another misjudgment. He kept thinking about her eyes, calm, intelligent, seeing. Not judging, but simply seeing. It was more unsettling than if she had yelled at him. He wondered if she would say anything, if this small, late-night airport interaction would somehow escalate, appear online, become a thing. He didn't want it to. He just wanted the shift to end, wanted to forget the feeling of realizing, too late, that he had underestimated and disrespected someone of significant stature. But it wasn't just her stature that unnerved him. It was the way she carried it. Not with demands or arrogance, but with a quiet, unshakable dignity that made his own brief display of petty power seem pathetic and small. He had meant to make her feel insignificant, and instead, in her quiet way, she had highlighted his own smallness. Maria walked beside Jasmine, occasionally glancing at her profile. She could tell Jasmine was internalizing the moment, not dwelling on it with anger or frustration, but processing it through the lens of lived experience. It wasn't the first time someone had treated Jasmine differently before realizing who she was, or even after. The layered nature of microaggressions meant they could come from anywhere, from anyone, often rooted in assumptions about appearance, status, or background. This incident, however, felt particularly stark because of the sudden visible shift in the employee's demeanor. It was like watching a curtain fall. Maria debated saying something else, something supportive, but she knew Jasmine appreciated quiet support over effusive commiseration. She settled for adjusting her own pace slightly, ensuring she was aligned with Jasmine, a silent statement of solidarity. They passed a group of younger travelers huddled around a charging station, their faces illuminated by phone screens. One of them glanced up as Jasmine passed, doing a double-take. A hushed whisper followed, quickly suppressed. The recognition was starting to spread organically, not just from those who witnessed the initial incident, but from the general public presence Jasmine carried with her. Jasmine didn't react to the whisper. She was used to being recognized in public, navigating the strange landscape of simultaneous visibility and attempts at erasure. She had mastered the art of being present without being performative, of acknowledging the public space she occupied while maintaining her personal boundaries. They reached the gate area for C-17. It was relatively quiet, only a few passengers already waiting. Jasmine chose a seat near the window, placing her bag and folder down carefully. She sat with her back straight, her hands folded calmly in her lap. The gesture of folded hands was characteristic of her, a sign of stillness and controlled energy. It was a small, symbolic action that spoke volumes about her state of mind, centered, composed, ready to wait. Maria took a seat beside her, pulling out a tablet to catch up on emails, but keeping a subtle eye on her surroundings and on Jasmine. She noticed a few other passengers glancing at them, doing the mental calculation. Familiar face, quiet demeanor, accompanying aid. The recognition was slow building, a quiet hum beneath the surface of the mundane gate waiting area. Back at the service desk, the employee was growing increasingly uneasy. The text message the woman had sent had reached its destination, and from there had been forwarded. Now, the woman's friend, who happened to be a minor presence on social media, had posted a cryptic tweet. Just heard this wild story about an airport employee being rude to a important person, then having a meltdown when they saw their ID. Some people really don't know who they're talking to, LOL. No names, no specific details, but enough to pique interest among a small network. It was a tiny pebble dropped in a vast pond, but the ripples were beginning. The employee, unaware of the nascent online chatter, felt a growing sense of unease. He had mentioned the interaction, casually and awkwardly, to a colleague during a brief moment away from the desk. Had a weird one just now, he'd muttered. Served, someone I should have recognized. Was a little short with them at first. His colleague, distracted, had just grunted in response. He felt increasingly isolated with his sudden realization. He kept replaying his own words, his own tone. Yeah, hold on. What's the issue? The casual disrespect felt magnified now, shameful in retrospect. He thought about the power imbalance he had attempted to create, the way he had tried to make her feel small, and how completely she had resisted that, not by fighting, but by simply being. Her dignity felt like a rebuke, delivered not through anger, but through its sheer, unwavering presence. He realized with a growing sense of dread that the power in that interaction hadn't been his, despite his position behind the counter. It had belonged entirely to the woman who remained calm while he fumbled with her identity. The cryptic tweet about the airport employee and the important person began to circulate within a small online circle. It was shared not because of the celebrity aspect, but because of the relatable scenario. Someone in a position of minor authority being dismissive, then having an abrupt change of heart upon recognizing the person they were interacting with. It tapped into a common frustration with bureaucratic indifference and the uneven application of respect. Someone who saw the tweet, remembering seeing the woman in line posting something similar, connected the dots. A private message was exchanged. Was that about Jasmine Crockett? The reply confirmed it. OMG, yes, my friend saw it. Employee was being awful, then went pale when he saw her ID. Suddenly the story had a name, a face, and a protagonist known for her composure and sharp intellect, particularly when navigating challenging public spaces. The story began to crystallize. A respected public figure, subject to casual disrespect, handled the situation with quiet dignity, causing the aggressor to instantly regret their actions. The narrative wrote itself, powered by the contrast between the employee's presumed rudeness and Jasmine's known grace under pressure. Back in the gate area, Jasmine remained seated by the window, her gaze occasionally drifting towards the tarmac. She wasn't checking her phone, her focus was elsewhere. She was in a state of quiet contemplation, processing the subtle energies of the day, including the brief, sharp interaction at the service desk. It was moments like these, small instances of friction, that reinforced the constant need for composure, for maintaining one's center when the world attempted to pull you off balance. Maria, monitoring her tablet, saw a notification flash across her screen. It was a news alert, or perhaps a trending topic notification, something that rarely pinged her work tablet unless it was significant. She tapped it open, her brow furrowing slightly as she read. Her eyes flickered towards Jasmine, then back to the screen. A short video clip was starting to gain traction. It wasn't of the interaction itself. No one had been recording overtly at the desk, but someone, perhaps the woman from the line or her friend, had quickly taken a short, shaky video after Jasmine walked away, showing the employee looking flustered and glancing repeatedly down the concourse, interspersed with a still photo of Jasmine from a public event, looking composed and strong. The juxtaposition was powerful. The caption accompanying the clip, or in the trending topic itself, was something like, "Airport employee regrets dismissing Rep. Jasmine Crockett." It was going viral, fast. The quotable moment wasn't a line spoken by Jasmine, but the visual of the employee's reaction contrasted with Jasmine's subsequent calm demeanor, captured from afar. The sheer lack of a dramatic confrontation was the viral element. Her quiet exit, her composed stillness in the gate area, captured in a subsequent discreet photo someone uploaded, became the powerful counterpoint to the employee's visible discomfort. This was the viral moment, the public witnessing of the employee's dawning realization, and the quiet dignity of the person he had underestimated. It wasn't about Jasmine reacting and winning. It was about the employee reacting to her lack of reaction, and the stark contrast exposing the dynamic. The silence after the slight, amplified by the visual proof of the employee's discomfort, was the powerful, clip-worthy content. Maria quickly lowered her tablet, her face carefully neutral. She knew Jasmine preferred to control the narrative, to respond deliberately and strategically, rather than be swept up in the immediate online storm. The storm, however, was gathering speed. The initial tweet had blossomed into a full-blown online event. Comments were flooding in. Outrage at the employee, praise for Jasmine's composure, debates about why people in service roles sometimes act this way, discussions about race, class, and power dynamics. The quiet, contained moment at the service desk had exploded onto the public stage, fueled by smartphone cameras and the rapid currents of social media. Jasmine remained unaware of the online storm, sitting calmly by the window, a symbol of stillness in the midst of the airport's constant motion. Her hands were still folded in her lap, her expression serene. The viral moment wasn't about her performance for the camera. It was about her authentic response to disrespect, a response of unwavering dignity. And in that dignity, she had inadvertently created a powerful, viral statement. The online reaction intensified. The video clip of the flustered employee glancing after Jasmine, juxtaposed with her composed public image, was being shared across platforms. News outlets picked up the trending topic, cautiously reporting on the viral airport incident involving Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. They didn't have footage of the initial interaction, only the aftermath and the public commentary. This lack of explicit confrontation footage ironically made Jasmine's role in the narrative even more powerful. She was the silent, dignified force around which the drama unfolded. The employee's name, initially unknown, began to surface as people speculated, or someone from the airport leaked it. This raised ethical questions online. Was it fair to identify him? But the momentum was unstoppable. The conversation shifted from just the funny anecdote of someone not knowing who they were talking to a deeper discussion about why the employee might have been dismissive in the first place. Was it just fatigue? Or was there an underlying assumption based on race, gender, or perceived status that led to his initial attitude? Jasmine's public image, a black woman in a position of significant power, added layers to the interpretation. Many commenters suggested that his initial disrespect stemmed from implicit bias, that he wouldn't have spoken to a similarly powerful white man in the same manner. This elevated the incident from a simple customer service failure to a potential example of microaggression and the subtle ways institutional power dynamics play out in everyday interactions. Maria continued to monitor the situation discreetly. She shielded her tablet screen slightly, aware of Jasmine's preference for focus and calm before important events, like her flight. She was filtering the noise, identifying the core narratives forming around the incident. The dominant narrative was overwhelmingly positive towards Jasmine, highlighting her composure as a strength. Comments celebrated her grace under pressure, her dignity, her ability to make the employee realize who he messed with, not by being loud, but by being silent and self-possessed. "That's how you do it," one popular comment read. "You don't need to make a scene, just let them realize their own foolishness." Another said, "Her silence was louder than any shout." Jasmine's stillness, her non-reaction, had become the central viral element, amplified by the contrast with the employee's visible discomfort captured in the shaky video. The viral moment wasn't a catchy phrase she spoke, but the powerful image of her unwavering calm in the face of disrespect. It was the visual symbol of dignity, holding firm. This was her viral quotable moment, not in words, but in bearing. The image of her seated calmly by the window in the gate area, which had also been shared, reinforced this. She wasn't engaging with the online frenzy. She was simply existing with poise. The employee, back at the service desk or perhaps already off shift, was likely facing the harsh reality of his brief interaction becoming a public spectacle. His moment of dismissiveness, intended to exert a tiny bit of control in a demanding job, had backfired spectacularly, exposing him to public scrutiny. The "instantly realizes who he's messed with" part of the title was playing out in real time, not just for him, but for everyone watching the viral moment spread. Jasmine remained untouched by the immediate storm, a quiet eye in the center of the online hurricane. She was allowing the moment to unfold, to allow the public to interpret and discuss it, knowing that her response, when it came, would need to cut through the noise and reframe the narrative on her terms. Her strategy was always patience, allowing the initial frenzy to subside before offering a considered, powerful perspective. Her quietness wasn't a lack of response, it was a strategic delay, building anticipation for the moment she would choose to speak, lending immense weight to her eventual words. Requests for comment from news outlets began to flood Maria's inbox and Jasmine's office. Reporters wanted the story from her perspective. They wanted to know how she felt, what she thought of the employee's behavior, whether she planned to take any action. The online debate raged, with some defending the employee. He was probably just tired, she's famous, she can handle it. And others condemning his behavior as unacceptable, especially towards a black woman in power. The debate itself, fueled by Jasmine's silence, broadened the impact of the incident beyond just a viral moment, pushing it into a discussion about respect, bias, and public interaction. Jasmine and Maria reviewed the incoming requests and online coverage together, later that night or perhaps the next morning, away from the immediate airport environment. Jasmine read the various interpretations of the event with a calm, analytical gaze. She wasn't defensive or angry. She was observant, noting how her simple, quiet response had been amplified and interpreted through various lenses. She understood the power of the moment she had created, not through any action, but through inaction, through maintaining her composure when expected to react. "They're framing it around his reaction," Jasmine observed, her voice quiet, reflecting on the dominant viral narrative. "About him realizing." Maria nodded. "That's what's getting the clicks, the instantly realizes part." Jasmine was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant. "But the story isn't about him realizing who I am," she said slowly, her voice gaining a quiet strength. "The story is about why his initial response was acceptable to him in the first place. It's about the assumptions we carry, the people we feel entitled to dismiss." This was the beginning of her reframing. The incident wasn't a personal anecdote of someone famous being unrecognized. It was a microcosm of a larger societal issue. She decided how she would address it, not with an angry statement or a call for the employee's job. That wouldn't serve the larger purpose. Her response would be measured, reflective, turning the focus away from the individual interaction and towards the systemic issues it represented. She would use the platform this viral moment had inadvertently given her to speak about the dignity of all people, regardless of whether they were recognized or not. She would speak about the insidious nature of casual disrespect and the importance of treating everyone with baseline humanity. She wouldn't name the employee publicly, opting instead to focus on the behavior and the system that sometimes enabled it. This restraint was deliberate. It wasn't about protecting him. It was about centering the message on the principle, not the personality. It was about elevating the conversation. This was the delayed rhetorical hammer being prepared. Her response would arrive not in the heat of the viral peak, but slightly after, designed to land with more weight and prompt deeper reflection. The viral moment had grabbed attention. Her response would aim to hold it and redirect it towards meaning. It would be a masterclass in leveraging a moment of personal slight into a statement of universal importance. She would take the public's fascination with the comeuppance narrative and pivot it towards empathy and understanding of the subtle battles for dignity fought every day by countless people who didn't have her public platform. Her calm at the airport wasn't just about managing her own emotions. It was a strategic act, preserving her energy and credibility for the moment when her words would carry the most weight. The viral spread was happening on one timeline. Her response was being crafted on another, slower, more deliberate timeline, designed for lasting impact. When Jasmine finally addressed the incident, it wasn't through a fiery press conference or an angry social media post. It was in a quiet, pre-recorded video shared on her official channels and later picked up by news outlets eager for her perspective. She sat in her office, composed and centered, looking directly into the camera. Her tone was calm, her expression serene. She acknowledged the viral video circulating online, the one showing the airport employee's reaction. She didn't dwell on his behavior or express personal offense. Instead, she used the incident as a starting point for a broader conversation. "There's a video circulating," she began, her voice steady, showing an interaction I had at the airport. "It highlights a moment where someone seemed to treat me a certain way, and then shifted when they realized who I was." She paused, allowing that simple statement to hang in the air. "Many people are focusing on that moment of realization," she continued. "The focus is on he didn't know who he was messing with. But I want us to think about something else." This was the rhetorical reversal, the pivot point of her message. "The question isn't why he changed his behavior when he recognized me," she stated clearly, her gaze unwavering. "The question is why that initial dismissiveness was his default behavior towards a stranger in the first place." This was the delayed rhetorical hammer, a single sentence that redefined the entire narrative. It wasn't about her status. It was about his default. It wasn't about him messing with her. It was about the casual disrespect shown to anyone. She spoke about the everyday indignities people face, the assumptions made based on appearance, profession, or background. She spoke about the fatigue of constantly having to prove you are worthy of basic respect. She framed the airport incident not as a personal attack, but as a symptom of a larger issue, the erosion of simple courtesy and the prevalence of implicit bias that leads people to dismiss others without a second thought. "My experience was amplified because of who I am," she acknowledged. "But the behavior I encountered is something countless people navigate every single day. The single mother rushing to catch a flight, the elderly person who is confused, the person whose first language isn't English, the person who simply doesn't look like who you expect to see in a position of authority." She listed these examples, drawing a line between her experience and the experiences of others who lacked her platform. "Dignity isn't something you earn based on your title or your recognition," she stated. "It is something everyone is born with and deserves to have respected." Her message was clear, powerful, and devoid of personal vengeance. She didn't call for the employee's punishment. She called for reflection, for a change in how people treat strangers. She used the viral moment, not to elevate herself, but to elevate the conversation around respect and implicit bias. The impact of her response was immediate and profound. Comment sections that had been filled with triumphant comments about the employee's comeuppance shifted. Her calm, principled message resonated deeply, prompting many viewers to look inward. The focus shifted from the schadenfreude of the employee's discomfort to the quiet power of Jasmine's message. She had taken a moment of personal friction and transformed it into a teachable moment for a nation, demonstrating that true strength lies not in retaliation, but in using your platform to advocate for universal respect. Her composure at the airport was not just a personal trait. It was a strategic act, a refusal to be drawn into a reactive spiral, preserving her energy and credibility for this precise moment, where her words could cut through the noise and land with maximum impact. The public response to Jasmine's video was overwhelmingly positive. Her calm, reasoned reframing of the airport incident resonated deeply with viewers who were tired of performative outrage and eager for substance. News outlets reported on her response, highlighting her pivot from the personal anecdote to the broader societal issue of respect and bias. The initial viral narrative of the employee's comeuppance didn't disappear entirely, but it was significantly overshadowed by the power of Jasmine's message. People shared her video, not just the original viral clip. They quoted her words, particularly the line, "The question isn't why he changed his behavior when he recognized me. The question is why that initial dismissiveness was his default behavior towards a stranger in the first place." That sentence, quiet and profound, became a new kind of viral moment, prompting reflection and discussion on a deeper level. Social media feeds that had been full of jokes about the employee were now filled with posts sharing Jasmine's video, accompanied by captions like, "This is how you lead," or "A masterclass in dignity." Her restraint, which some initially might have misinterpreted as passive, was now widely recognized as her greatest strength. It wasn't just that she hadn't yelled, it was that she had chosen to respond by advocating for universal respect, turning a personal slight into a moment of collective examination. The emotional reward for the audience was not the satisfaction of seeing the employee suffer, but the quiet elevation of witnessing a leader use a difficult moment to articulate a powerful moral principle. The incident became a case study in navigating microaggressions with dignity, demonstrating that maintaining one's composure and focusing on the larger issue could be far more impactful than immediate confrontation. Discussions arose about how often people, particularly women and people of color, are subjected to casual disrespect and how exhausting it is to constantly have to assert their worthiness. Jasmine's quiet resilience at the airport became a symbol for this everyday struggle. Her image, calm, collected, unwavering, became synonymous with dignity under scrutiny. The airport employee, who had inadvertently triggered this national conversation, faded from the center of the narrative. His brief moment of public discomfort became a footnote to the larger, more important discussion Jasmine had initiated. The focus shifted from his mistake to the systemic issues her experience had highlighted. The incident served as a powerful reminder that how we treat strangers matters, that basic respect is not contingent on recognition or status, and that casual dismissiveness can be rooted in biases we may not even be aware of. Jasmine's ability to elevate the conversation, to turn a moment of personal indignity into a lesson in universal humanity, solidified her reputation not just as a sharp political figure, but as a moral compass. Her quiet strength had triumphed, not over the employee, but over the impulse to let a moment of disrespect descend into an unproductive personal conflict, choosing instead to lift it into a dialogue about how we can build a more respectful society. The ripple effect of her dignity continued to spread, long after the initial viral wave had crested. The immediate online storm around the airport incident began to subside, replaced by the longer, more thoughtful conversations sparked by Jasmine's response. Comment threads debated the nuances of implicit bias, shared personal stories of similar experiences, and praised Jasmine's ability to remain centered in the face of provocation. Her quiet approach became a point of reference, a model for how to navigate public disrespect without losing one's own dignity or resorting to unproductive anger. The airport employee, whose face had been briefly thrust into the public sphere, was likely facing consequences or at least uncomfortable conversations within his workplace. His realization of who he'd messed with extended beyond the immediate moment at the counter. It had become a public, albeit often anonymous, reckoning. But Jasmine's response had prevented it from becoming a prolonged public shaming campaign targeted specifically at him. By shifting the focus to the systemic issue, she had offered a path for understanding, rather than just condemnation. The incident faded from the front pages, but its impact lingered in the collective consciousness. It served as a quiet touchstone in conversations about respect, recognition, and the often invisible labor of maintaining composure in spaces where you are not automatically granted deference. Jasmine continued her work, the airport incident just one brief chapter in a long and impactful journey, but the way she handled it, with quiet strength, strategic patience, and a focus on universal principles, left a lasting impression. The image of her calm demeanor at the service desk, the contrast with the employee's visible discomfort, and the profound clarity of her later words formed a powerful triptych. It was a visual and verbal illustration of dignity as a form of power, a force that doesn't need to assert itself loudly to be felt deeply. The story wasn't just about a public figure being recognized. It was about the dignity inherent in every person, and the quiet power of refusing to let someone else's disrespect diminish that inherent worth. It was a story about choosing grace over grievance, and finding strength in silence and reflection before speaking with purpose. The quiet woman at the airport counter, in her refusal to be drawn into a petty conflict, had shown millions what true composure looks like, and in doing so, had amplified a message far larger than herself. Her stillness became a movement. Her silence became a statement. Her dignity became a viral force, reminding people of the quiet battles for respect fought every single day. If this story moved you, share it. Not to go viral, but to remind people what dignity looks like.